Sunday at 8 on ITV and ITV Hub.
Now a look at all the latest headlines. It's the ITV News.
NHS walkouts within weeks as the biggest nursing strike in history looks likely to go ahead. Up to 300,000 members of the Royal College of Nursing have voted on industrial action, with some saying the pay rises on offer are affecting their families.
I would like to give my daughter experiences that she'll remember, that she'll cherish. Unfortunately, because of the cost of living, because of the underinflation pay rises that nurses are receiving, I'm not able to do that.
Also ahead, the Prime Minister's judgment is called into question for promoting Sir Gavin Williamson to Cabinet Minister, despite serious accusations of bullying. A climate tipping point. 2 weeks of talks at COP27 get underway in Egypt to tackle humanity's greatest challenge and...
Down England at Twickenham.
Embarrassment for England as they lose to Argentina for the first time in more than a decade, heaping new pressure on coach Eddie Jones.
This is ITV News with Lucy Watson.
Good evening. The biggest nursing strike in NHS history looks set to happen before Christmas. More than 300,000 members of the Royal College of Nursing have been balloted over the walkouts. The full results are expected in days, and union sources say large swathes of the country voted in favour of industrial action. It's in a row over pay as the cost of living crisis deepens. Should the strikes go ahead, many non-emergency services could be taken out, and patients who are already facing record waiting lists may see their operations and appointments delayed or cancelled. Danny Sinha reports.
Matt may be enjoying fatherhood again, but he's struggling to make ends meet. He works as a mental health nurse in the East Midlands, as does wife Nicole. But like thousands of others, the cost of living is taking its toll.
I would like to give my daughter experiences that she'll remember, that she'll cherish. Unfortunately, because of the cost of living, because of the underinflation pay rises that nurses are receiving, I'm not able to do that. And that hurts, that does hurt me as a father.
As many families continue to juggle household bills, making what they do pay has never been more important.
Well, the results of the ballot is due out in the next couple of days, but the Royal College of Nursing isn't disputing that most of its members have voted for strike action. Now, when that does take place, it would be the first ever national strike to happen in the union's 104-year history.
They were our heroes during the pandemic, but many now feel undervalued, complaining they've suffered real-term pay cuts for years. At the moment, the typical annual salary for a registered and experienced Band 5 nurse is £32,000. Now, the government's offering a pay rise of 4%, which would increase the basic annual wage to around £37,000. But nurses want a pay rise of 5% above inflation, which currently sits at 12%. That will push their salary up to over £41,000. But many services are already facing record waiting lists, with lengthy delays to operations and appointments. 36-year-old content creator David Beck went to his GP after a lump on his shoulder started to change shape. He's been waiting for 3 months and fears the worst.
It does actually get to you. Because it's like you're trapped in limbo. You don't know if it's serious or not. You don't know if it's nothing or if it's... You don't know what's going to be around the corner. You don't know if you've got 3 months to wait.
The government has appealed to nurses to consider the impact strike action will have on patients, but insists it does have contingency plans to deal with the worst.
Well, Danny joins me now. Danny, a challenging winter ahead for the National Health Service.
Well, you can say that again, and it's not just nurses who want to strike. We're talking about all sectors of the NHS. Ambulance workers, for example, in England and Wales, they are currently deciding whether they should go on strike. We've got ballots across 11 trusts in England. They close at the end of the month. We've also got midwives. They're deciding to go ballot their members this week. Then we've got the British Medical Association. They represent GPs, junior doctors, consultants, and they say that strike action by their members is inevitable. Now, let's not forget, this was always going to be a difficult time for the NHS. It's the first winter, of course, since the pandemic. And, of course, it is winter, so all those normal pressures that hospitals face, flu, COVID, they're always going to be stretched at this time of year. But put on top of that an unhappy workforce, and it is extremely difficult to see how patients won't be affected in some shape or form.
Thank you, Danny. Fresh questions are being asked of the Prime Minister's decision-making after it emerged Rishi Sunak promoted a cabinet minister, even though he faced accusations of bullying. Today, text messages containing foul language and expletives allegedly sent by Sir Gavin Williamson to a former colleague were leaked to the press. Well, our political correspondent Harry Horton is at Downing Street for us this evening. Harry, just talk us through this. Who's made this complaint?
Yeah, the complaint was made by Wendy Morton, a Conservative MP who was Chief Whip in Liz Truss's government at the time, and all to do with messages sent to her by Sir Gavin Williamson over the fact he felt he was being excluded from attending the Queen's funeral. Now, as Gavin Williamson walked up Downing Street less than 2 weeks ago to be reappointed to the government, Rishi Sunak was aware that a formal complaint had been made against Gavin Williamson, and it was of a nature of bullying and intimidation. Now, we're told that Rishi Sunak didn't know the exact details of these messages, which are threatening and contain quite explicit language. This morning, Cabinet colleagues of Sir Gavin Williamson were out defending him.
These were sent in the heat of the moment, expressing frustration. It was a difficult time for the party. I think he now accepts that he shouldn't have done it, and he regrets doing so, and I think that's right. And thankfully, we're in a bit of a better place now as a party.
So, Harry, how damaging is all this for the Prime Minister?
Well, it's a problem for him. When he stood on Downing Street less than 2 weeks ago, he said that his new government would be one of integrity, professionalism and accountability. And it's not just the appointment of Sir Gavin Williamson that raises questions about that. It's also the appointment of the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. Of course, he was ousted from that position over a security breach. Opposition parties say this raises questions about the Prime Minister's judgment.
There needs to be a proper investigation. And yet again, it's an example of Rishi Sunak putting his own interests before the needs of the country in appointing someone like Gavin Williamson to the cabinet.
There's no suggestion, I think, that Sir Gavin Williamson is about to be sacked, but certainly questions for the Prime Minister this week.
Harry at Downing Street, thank you. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister is on his way to Egypt to join more than 100 world leaders at the COP27 Climate Change Summit in Sharm el-Sheikh. As the conference began, the United Nations released a new report suggesting the past 8 years have been the hottest on record. Neil Connery has the story.
I'm delighted to welcome you officially to COP27. Salam alaikum.
As the latest crucial climate change conference opened in Sharm el-Sheikh, the nations gathering here know they'll be judged by results. The UK's outgoing president of the talks, Alok Sharma, spoke of the changes since last year's Glasgow summit.
Despite this progress, I fully recognise the scale of the challenge still in front of us. Just as every report shows that we are making some progress, they're equally clear that there is so much more to be done in this critical decade.
Rishi Sunak will highlight the UK's commitment when he addresses the conference in a speech on Monday, saying we need to move further and faster to transition to renewable energy, and I will ensure the UK is at the forefront of this global movement as a clean energy superpower. A new UN report says the past 8 years are on track to be the hottest on record. Scientists say the evidence confronting this summit couldn't be clearer.
I really hope that this time people look at the evidence that we have in front of us of the really disastrous state of the climate. The fact that we have so much heat in our ocean, we've got accelerating sea level rise, we have glaciers melting, we have natural hazards like floods and droughts and heat waves killing people around the world.
2 weeks of long and intense negotiations between countries on climate action will now get underway. With the future of the planet at stake, leaders will need to deliver more than just warm words. The urgency of the challenge could not be greater. Neil Connery, ITV News.
Well, our correspondent Peter Smith is in Sharm el-Sheikh for us. Peter, are they likely to reach any agreements at the end of all this?
Well, it's the 27th COP, the 27th attempt to find agreement between all the countries about what to do about this climate emergency. What we can say is that while the climate is changing, the world's trying to tackle a changing climate. The world has also changed in the last year since COP26 in Glasgow and those bold agreements. Russia's invasion on Ukraine has in part created an energy crisis that's seen countries move away from their pledge to cut back on coal. They've refired up old coal power stations. There's been a food crisis, there's been a financial crisis, and this has diverted attention away from the priority of the climate crisis. And I think that what this COP is about is trying to get back on track. And what we've seen there about the warming climate in the last 8 years, certainly in the last year, what I've reported on in the Arctic and in Africa, glaciers melting, the sea life there dying, people in Somalia on the brink of famine. And this is about trying to create loss and damage reparations for those who have been least responsible for that. But that so far has been difficult to find any agreement, which is a sign of things to come.
Peter in Egypt, thank you. At least 19 people have died after a plane crashed into Lake Victoria in Tanzania. The Precision Air flight got into difficulty as it attempted to land in the northern city of Bukoba. 26 of the 43 people on board have been taken to hospital, with local fishermen helping rescue teams. Sir Ed Davey has hit out at the Tories in a scathing speech to his party members. The Lib Dem leader said the Conservatives had almost bankrupted Britain and that political infighting during the cost of living crisis is a betrayal of the British people. He wants a general election.
People need a government in control, with a plan, with a fair deal. But what have we got instead? Chaos. From Conservative clowns who either don't get it or just don't care.
Sport now, and England's Rugby Union players suffered an embarrassing defeat to Argentina at Twickenham in their first Autumn Nations match of the season. It's the first time the visitors have won the fixture since 2009, putting renewed pressure on the England coach Eddie Jones. Chris Scudder watched the action.
Any hopes of some Argentine sunshine were a touch optimistic. On a filthy day, it was England left with dark clouds hanging over HQ. A gusty God Save the King, and then a storm-force finish from Joe Thokanasiga had everything looking bright.
And Thokanasiga barrelling his way through.
But England were then undone by two lightning strikes from the Pumas early in the second half.
To Carreras, and that is wonderful.
They only had themselves to blame for the second try, and Argentina accepted the gift. 2 tries in the space of 2 minutes.
And they will have 2 in almost as many minutes.
Jack van Poortvliet had an even quicker impact, scoring within 30 seconds of coming off the bench for England.
Into gear, over the line.
But Argentina had the boot of Buffelli to settle the match by a single point, 30-29. No wonder they were thrilled, their first win at Twickenham for 16 long years. Plenty to ponder for England coach Eddie Jones. Chris Scudder, ITV News.
Arsenal have returned to the top of the Premier League after a 1-0 win over Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. The only goal came just after the hour mark when the home side failed to deal with a corner and Gabriel turned the ball over the line. Meanwhile, Newcastle are up to third after a 4-1 win at Southampton. The pick of the goals came in injury time when Bruno Guimaraes curled a strike into the bottom corner. And in this evening's match, Liverpool are on course to beat Tottenham. Mo Salah has scored twice, with the Reds leading 2-1 going into the final few minutes. And that's all for now. I'm back with the late news at 11:15. See you later.